The National Biosafety and Biotechnology Bill has been retabled in Parliament. The bill, which seeks to provide a regulatory framework that facilitates the safe development and application of biotechnology in Uganda, had earlier been rejected by the president. On one side of the debate are scientists who believe that as crop yields fluctuate, GMOs and hybrids are required to ensure food and nutritional security. The alternative view is that the law will unleash devastating consequences for the health of Ugandans. On the spot tonight is a panel of 4 scientists, including Dr. Joseph Okia, an internal medicine specialist, Dr. Girgen Oluport, a soil biophysicist, Dr. Clet Wandui Masiga, a breeding and genetics scientist, and Dr. Titus Alichai, a plant virologist. Gentlemen, you're most welcome. Thank you for honoring our invitation, and the 4 of you are on the spot tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Let me begin with you, I think, Dr. Alichai, because the GMO debate is quite combustible here in Africa. It lies at the intersection of science and aid. Those in favor are saying we need as farmers to adapt because of the changing situations to ensure food security, and yet those against it claim it's another trap, just like aid to enrich Western farms like Monsanto. What is the case here?
I think to begin with, we need to understand what GMO is. The debate is raging, but I believe there's a limited understanding out there on what GMO is. It's an acronym for genetically modified organisms, and by that it falls within the realm of what is generally referred to as biotechnology, so which simply means creating products using living organisms or parts of living organisms for the benefit of mankind. So that's what we are debating here. It's a technology that has been adopted globally. I think started in about 1970s, and is now widely used in different spheres of life. In agriculture, it's used to improve crops, for example, to make them better, more resilient to stresses out there, to be more nutritious, to be more resilient in terms of resistance to pests and diseases. It's also being used in medicine, in the making of vaccines, for example, in making products like insulin that our people use. Those are all products of biotechnology. So it's grown. In terms of agriculture, I think the first commercial production of agriculture in agriculture was in 1996. So we are 22 years down the road, 17 million farmers growing biotech crops or GMO crops around the world.
17 million farmers?
Yes.
In a population of 7 billion?
Yes, and okay. About 500 million acres of biotech crops planted in 2016. From 1996 to 2016, that's about 20 years. I think overall we are talking of about 5 billion acres of GMO crops planted globally. So that's the current status of, as far as special agriculture is concerned, which is my comfort zone.
Okay, I understand because of climatic change, because of so many stresses, the soil fertility that is also changing, farmers can never get the yields that they require. And they're saying the use of science really is important because the population is increasing, the soil fertility is lessening, and so you have to bring in science so that humanity can continue to survive. But Dr. Oluport, you seem to have a different idea or view about this.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, and listeners and viewers out there. I think we have to get the basics right first. If we are talking about production, what are the drivers of production? This one of the questions that the proponents of GMOs have failed to understand is what exactly is the problem that is being addressed. If you address the constraint of water and nutrients, what is the remaining yield gap? How much have we fared so well in this water and nutrients? I've just submitted the final version of a book chapter to Advances in Soil Science, due to be published to coincide with the World Soils Day on 5th December this year. And I tried to draw graphs and see where does Uganda lie. Even if you put it within sub-Saharan Africa, it doesn't feature on the map because of the extremely low level of use of fertilizers. How much have we achieved in that? And then the issue of water. Right now, are you hearing about famine now that there is food insecurity here? Why are you not? Because there has been stable rain in the country. And that is water alone. How much more can we push the farmer in terms of production when we bring in on board the nutrients? At least raise a farmer to 10 kilograms, not even the 50 kilograms per farmer, which was agreed upon during the African Summit on fertilizer use in Abuja in 2006. We have not moved an inch. The proponents are diverting us from the real solution
But it appears, Dr. Laporte, that you have two solutions, that we can still use water and use better farming methods and increase on our yields, but also you can use the science also approach the same.
That is the misunderstanding. What is the definition of science? First of all, there's nothing like GMOs and hybrids. The starting point for a GMO is that they are modifying hybrids. There is no GMO that has been engineered to increase yield. I remain to be educated about one and the mechanisms through which the yield is increased. Because to increase yield, there must be carbon, there must be hydrogen, there must be oxygen, and the rest of the nutrients which come from the soil. Because those three, the first three, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, are actually derived from the atmosphere in form of water and carbon dioxide, which GMO has been bred to increase biomass. They are dealing with hybrids that would actually do well in their own right. And that's why you see, for example, water efficient maize for Africa, which is purported to be drought tolerant. The experiments are taking place in Mubuku, a very dark soil and fertile. And then they are adding nutrients, and then they are irrigating.
Instead of taking to Karamoja or
somewhere. So when somebody gets 10 tons from there, which would be got from any hybrid which is not genetically modified, it will be marketed to the government as the wonders of what?
Let me take GMOs. Dr. Masiga, maybe to explain to us the difference between a hybrid and a GMO, and then we get to know what are we dealing with in Uganda as we talk.
Thank you, and good evening, listeners. With a hybrid, we are talking about a result of a breeding process, which gives you what we call in science heterolysis, meaning you are benefiting from two better performing parents. So the hybrid is performing much better than the two, and normally we refer to hybrid vigor. If we translate it to humans, if you are a handsome man married to a beautiful woman, so what you get?
A designer baby.
A designer baby. Now, they have been designed because of their better performance, uniformity, and also to target a specific character that a farmer may require. Now, with a GMO, it's genetically modified, meaning a certain event or a gene has been included in any of...
You have tampered with the DNA structure of the crop.
Not really tampering, but everything that we do, and the difference between you and me is as a result of the arrangement of your DNA, which is slightly different from mine. But in the terms of the total quantity of the DNA is the same. It's the arrangement that differs a little bit. And that's the only difference between you and me. So the same applies to a plant, to livestock or animals. So you get a specific gene for a specific purpose. For example, if you are dealing with a crop that is susceptible to drought, for us in genetics, we talk of drought being controlled by very many genes. But out of the very many genes, there are genes that play a much bigger role than others. So when you are transforming it for drought tolerance, you target those genes that play or have more influence on drought tolerance than the others. So you can still have a GMO that is hybrid, and you can have a GMO that is open pollinated. Open pollinated means a crop that you can plant today, harvest, pick part of the seeds or part of its offspring, plant again, plant again, plant again, without necessarily the hills going down. But with a hybrid, a moment you replant, it starts to what?
Declining
to
in
segregate.
terms of what it can give.
In other words, it goes back to its original parents. After every generation, it splits again, splits again. So you will start having non-uniform and not well-performing varieties.
Okay, Dr. Kia, your problem, if I got you right when I'm trying to contact you, is that GMOs could introduce a health problem for us. What is the fear?
Well, okay, I can talk about the fear. DNA is the holy grail of science, yes? It is the core of what a living thing is. And nature invests a lot in protecting that DNA. It makes sure that it ties it very tightly, hides it inside the cell, and produces many mechanisms to make sure that DNA is not tampered with, except by natural processes. To do a GMO, you must disrupt these natural processes. And you must forcefully open this DNA, and you must force what you're trying to introduce, whether it's coming from another plant or from another species, which is, by the way, another thing about GMO. You overcome species barriers. You mix species. You mix an animal with a plant that would not have naturally mixed, yes? So you must use force. When you use force, you destabilize DNA. And destabilized DNA is very, very dangerous. It is at the core of many diseases, like cancer, like leukemia. Leukemia, by the way, one of the forms of leukemia is just destabilized DNA. We look for the gene. It's called BCL, ABR. It's a gene, one, that destabilizes the DNA and then causes sickness and disease. So it is not a far-fetched, it is the science that is telling us this is a risky venture. And secondly, we now have evidence, yes? People are asking, what is happening? So many people getting diabetes, so many people getting high blood pressure, heart disease. It is all on the rise. And people are looking for what is the factor. And one of the factors we're landing on is food, yes? And not just food. These GMO foods, people are experimenting. They are feeding it to animals. And they are finding these animals develop a number of problems.
But the medicine you're using to treat patients in itself, in most cases, is also GMO.
The medicine.
Why are you giving them GMO medicine,
yes,
and you think it's okay?
You're talking here about food. That's the first thing. Food, we're talking about soils, yes? The medicine is tested extensively in what we call randomized control.
So you're suggesting these other scientists do not have the capacity to test what they're doing?
They do not. It is not tested on human beings. And they resist any effort to test it on human beings. And whoever produces evidence that this thing is risky, instead of scientifically countering them, they attack people. They say, oh, that is rubbish, that is nonsense. If it was science, then we just do it. Let's get...
Is it true, Dr. Titus? Is it true, Dr. Titus, that in your science and trying to produce GMOs, you're actually mixing animals and plants? For example, I could be eating beans, but you have actually mixed them with pigs.
The most valuable thing for scientists is integrity. So there's something called ethics in science. You lose your integrity, that will be the end of you. And this is a globally regulated practice, working with GMOs. It's not a question of a scientist waking up and beginning to work on anything that they have dreamt of. There are regulations, there are processes that follow. You have to lay bare what you are proposing to do, there are ethical considerations that have to be taken into account. So such a study would never be allowed. And
so are you saying, Dr. Alachai, that there's no mixing of plants and animals in making a GMO? That scenario does not exist? Is that what you're saying?
It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. First of all, when we're in the making of a GMO, you do not take the animal per se. Yeah? Or you do not take...
What do you take out? What do you take out from the animal?
I'll give you an example of the work that we're doing here in Uganda with banana.
In Namulonge?
At Kawanda.
At Kawanda.
We have observed that banana in Uganda is being devastated by a bacteria that causes the banana to rot. And we also know that a similar disease actually occurs on pepper, green pepper, that we prepare our salads with. That's common here. But green pepper is not affected, does not suffer from that disease. So we have gone deep down at the level of the DNA to understand what makes DNA pepper resistant to this bacteria and banana not resistant. So it is that piece of DNA or small set or part of it, that instruction which we call gene, that has been transferred.
So you have actually mixed pepper and banana in creating
and we eat
resistance.
Pepper and banana every day. We have used techniques that are very, very similar to vaccination. You know what causes a disease in a plant, and you know what it is in a plant that recognizes the disease-causing agent, and that information we use to trigger the defense systems in the plant to make the plant more resistant. So that's the kind of, but before I leave the other points that my colleague here mentioned of the disruption of DNA, the genetic makeup of any living organism is never stable. The human beings you see today are not the same stature or complexion of our forefathers. The maize that we eat today, 6,000 years ago, was a piece of grass called teosinte. But over time, through what we learned and what is known as domestication, man has kept improving, using technology, advancing technology into what we can now consume as maize.
It has evolved has it evolved on its own, or man has tampered with its genes and DNA?
Man originally, as we know, is a hunter and gatherer. So whatever he has found good, he keeps making it better over time. So that's where genetics comes in.
Yeah, but you're talking about 6,000 years of evolution, which you want to reduce in about in a day. Can something go wrong there? 6,000 years of evolution versus 1 week of creating something.
So that's where man progresses. That man uses intellect to make processes more efficient, to produce products that they need for that time.
Dr. Lupot, there is your answer. Yes, there are GMOs in Uganda. Here's an example of banana and to treat a problem in banana, mixing it with pepper.
Actually, I implore my colleague to go and read more about what he's talking about. The pepper was used.
Are you challenging his intelligence?
This is a common characteristic. We are dealing with a network that is well established. Yes, they have the science, but that science, when you go into the depth of it, something is lacking. I get surprised to hear that the gene was isolated from pepper. Pepper was actually used as a stepping stone to hide the gene from wherever it came before it was introduced into banana as a pepper gene. And that's one of the frauds.
So what do you know about where the gene came from before it went to the pepper?
And that's why I'm telling him to go, and because I'm not here to talk about that. There's a lot of either deliberately or genuinely lack of understanding of what these scientists are doing. And so they cannot even appreciate the impacts that they create.
Mr. Patrick,
Yes.
I would want us to go back to the original point,
Yes.
because I said that you mix species. Over 95% really of the world's GMO are plants that have been mixed with a trait from a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis. Yes, it is a bacteria. That bacteria produces a certain poison. It's poisonous for insects. So now I get this poisonous bacteria, I mix it with the maize. Now this maize, when you test it, it's DNA. It is now, it has DNA of maize and it has DNA of bacteria. So now it is no longer maize, neither is it a bacteria. We call it now a GMO. It has been modified. And we call it BT, Bacillus thuringiensis corn, yes? So now you have mixed two species that God never intended to mix, and even nature never intended to mix. When you eat that thing, you're eating the two. You're eating the bacteria and you're eating the maize. And that is where the problem comes in.
But that is only one level of mixing. Actually, if we wanted to go into the details, that's why I'm saying there is a lack of understanding of what really is taking place. There are about 4 or 5 levels of mixing. First, there is that vector. If you are using the vector method to transfer the genes, you have to manipulate the DNA of that vector to be able to take foreign information. The next level is now, how do you test to tell that that vector has actually taken the information that you want it to transfer? One of the processes is what they call marker-assisted selection. You can dose it with an antibiotic so that it gets immunized. Once you have done the modification, you come and spray everything else. Those that survive are the ones that have actually taken the gene. So maybe Dr. Kia, let me complete this point, because Dr. Kia will talk about antimicrobial rise in antimicrobial resistance. Where is that one coming now? The next level is, once you have introduced this gene, you know, there are costs of switching on or switching off a gene in the DNA. It must remain switched on, for example, to produce that toxin, the BT toxin. The gene must remain switched on. How do you keep it switched on? They use what they call the promoters. There are commonly 2 promoters, and these are viral DNAs from the cassava mosaic virus or the sunflower mosaic virus. There are very few viruses that are promiscuous. Most of them are specific. And those that are promiscuous are not the type that are known to cause diseases. Those that are, for example, you cannot get a cassava mosaic virus attacking maize. Nature has put their reproductive and physiological barriers that do not allow that to take place. What the scientists... Let me complete it. What the scientists do at the DNA level now...
Let us ask Dr. Titus what he really does.
Actually, he has really said it. If a cassava virus cannot attack maize, how on earth would you expect it to attack a human being?
No, that is...
Do you have the same genetic makeup with me?
That is missing the point I was coming to. That is missing the point I was coming to. What does it mean now when you bring this a viral DNA of a species or something that has not existed with that one for so many millions of years? The DNA will have to find a way of accommodating that information. Some genes will be switched on, others will be switched off. Which ones will be switched on, which ones will be switched off? And that is where the burden of the problem that they cannot understand is coming from.
Okay, Dr. Masiga.
Thank you.
Before we take a break.
Let me start with BT, which is a gene that is inserted into maize to confer resistance to pests, particularly the common armyworm. BT is a natural organic pesticide. So organic farmers everywhere in the world use BT, which is made from the soil, and this BT is used to spray on these crops as an organic pesticide. What the scientists do is to immunize or incorporate this particular BT into the crop such that the crop is able to resist. And all that you see, all of us who are looking different, it is as a result of rearrangement of the DNA. It can be one molecule. It's a matter of rearranging the sequence of the bases that make a gene. So what Olupot is talking about is actually what happens in nature. Maybe for purposes of our viewers, how was this genetic engineering discovered? This was a group of scientists working on, actually they were pathologists, working on crop diseases. Now they find this crop which has some kind of a wound on it. If you are quite adventurous when you move through villages, you could have perhaps seen some avocados with some kind of a wound. So they try to find out what is in there. And they actually discover that actually what makes this kind of wound is a bacterium genome has been incorporated into part of the plant genome, and that is what is making that component. So they actually isolated that piece. And that piece is the one that is now being used, which Olupot was struggling with to explain, that is used to move the gene. So it is used as a carrier. Now, DNA being what it is, the difference between you, a human being, and grass, for example, is not more than 50% of the genes. They are all similar, but it's just a rearrangement. And now this science has even advanced further to the extent that you don't now need to move a gene from anywhere. You just need to actually check within the DNA of an organism, remove or just rearrange a gene within without my cell doing anything else, and you actually get something of value. Now, how do we do that? We first screen. We have been screening, and scientists have been screening different varieties. For example, if you are to find out what variety of maize is resistant or tolerant to drought, you will get a whole range, maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000 of them. Subject them to drought. Then you will find some of them performing better, some medium, some really fail, others are performing best. Now, the ones that are performing best, if they are replicated many times, then those are your target.
Okay.
So you start from there, then you mimic in the lab. Now, from the lab is when you take to the real field. So when our colleagues talk of testing drought tolerance in Kasese, that is not an end in itself. It's a progression of research. You start from one place. By the time it is released, it has gone through what we call a multinational trial, meaning you select representative regions where you test all this, and if you get one which performs stable across these environments and is unique and uniform, that's the one that is whose data is presented to the National Variety Release Committee, which have civil society, it have medics there, it have human rights people there, it has lawyers, it has scientists. So a whole range of experts are in there. So by the time they make a decision, and they are free to actually go and verify, all you need is provide them some sample of seed to go and verify by themselves before it is commercially released for cultivation. So when Dr. Okia talks, these things don't just go out there. They're actually breeders who die without ever releasing what they have been working. Because you must go through this laborious process.
The process is laborious. But how about the fear that you introduce what they call the termination gene in a crop, so that the farmer can only come back to you if he wants to plant? And these indigenous species that have had for thousands of years can actually disappear because you have just tampered with their, you have rearranged what you call you rearranged the DNA.
First, allow me to quickly add on the issue of developing drought-tolerant maize. I want to inform Dr. Rupoti that Kasese, where we do the trials, is actually a drought-prone area. That's why there's even an irrigation scheme there. And what we do is
with very fertile soil.
We test the plants when there's no rain, and we use the irrigation water just to introduce to those plots, and then some of the other plots where we're testing actually have no water. So that's why we chose that location, that anything that can come out of Kasese, which has very little rain, can then serve farmers in periods of
the soils in Kasese, that soil where those experiments...
Maybe allow me to talk about soil briefly.
Let me comment about it.
You see, there are different...
Excuse me.
They are trying to cure the problem of drought.
The kind of soil... Have you been to
Mubuku?
Mubuku?
Not soil.
Have you been to Mubuku?
I know Mubuku.
The kind of soil that you find there, that dark soil, it's about less than 10% of the land area of Uganda. So when you do experiments, there is what we call representativeness. 70% of our soil
research in continuum.
70% of
it wasn't
why
the
don't
end
you
point.
take it to a drought area?
No.
It is a
Okay,
progression.
gentlemen, doctors, you're all doctors.
70% of our soils are feral soils.
We are going to take a
And
break,
that should be where
and we'll
experiments
be
should be taking
right
place.
back.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we are back on air, and I know you guys, this has been heated even off air. I have Dr. Joseph Okia, Dr. Girigon Olopot, Dr. Clint Wandui Masiga, and Dr. Titus Alechai. We're discussing Biotechnology and Biosafety Bill 2017, which is back in Parliament. But before we went to the break, I was trying to ask you, Dr. Titus, on the concerns of a Ugandan farmer who thinks that you're going to introduce the termination gene so that he's not able to replant his seeds, and he'll always have to come to you or maybe to Monsanto to look for the seed to plant.
So the so-called Terminator gene actually does not exist. In a technology, when you're developing a product, by the time you arrive with the final product, you would have discovered so many things, so many prototypes, early versions that actually do not make it to the market. So this was simply an idea of a scientist that you can actually make a gene express itself once, and it doesn't go on through multiple generations. But the global scientific community prevailed on him. That idea never left the lab. So that is, I think.
So there's no Terminator gene?
There's no Terminator gene.
So can I ask you?
Can
I ask
Dr. Lupot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We seem to be pushing deep into what we don't know. Brazil is still battling court cases with Monsanto because Monsanto wants the moratorium that was imposed following the incidences in Indonesia, Argentina. That was 2013. When the moratorium on Terminator technology was imposed. And the company now sees that it's losing in terms of business. If a farmer can share, plant, then that is a loss to the company. The other strategy they have been trying is to make sure that when the patent expires, actually they withdraw the variety from the market. So for me to hear that Terminator technology never left the lab, it is very absurd.
I think my friend is confusing what we call hybrids, which are
I am talking about Terminator
GMO
technology, where the seed is designed to lose viability upon reaching maturity, so that when you plant, it never germinates.
I wanted to ask.
It is a version of.
Let me have Dr.
No.
Yes, Dr. Masiga, then Dr.
Yeah, the truth of the matter, globally, maize with the Terminator gene was developed, but it remained in the lab. Globally, it was condemned because it was seen to be a non-ethical issue, or very unethical to actually have something, because in nature, there are some levels of crossing. So if it would cross, then you are not able to replant. That never left the lab anywhere in the world.
Why is Brazil in courts with
Nothing
Monsanto?
like that ever happened. All you are telling us, I don't know where you get that data.
Okay, Doctor, let's have Dr. Kia.
Mine is
I
think, we're really getting so confused in the science of things. But really, this is more of an economic issue. It is a health issue. Because the question I have for the GMO promoters, can you take a GMO the way my grandmother back in Kumi would store the seed? She keeps it for the next season. They share the seed.
Yes, you can. Yes,
and you will get the same yield?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes, you can.
But you just said something quite different.
I developed GMO maize for drought tolerance.
They have not.
And the technique we used was get the gene. We use IPT gene, which naturally, when there is less moisture, it switches off the plant mechanism to sense that there is less moisture, so the leaves remain green and it continues manufacturing the food for the plant. Now, this was specifically put in what we call farmer-preferred local open pollinated maize varieties. We picked varieties from Uganda, from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Ethiopia and Sudan. We put the gene there, tested it. You can pick the seed, plant, pick some of the cobs, keep them, plant again, and continue.
You see,
so, but we can do the same. We can do the same technology in hybrid. But now for bananas, just take the same sucker you go and plant.
If I may interject, we have just been talking off air about the Plant Variety Protection Act, the intellectual property. Do we really understand the devil in the details in those laws? Because intellectual property is for America, UPOV is for Europe. Replanting is not an option. Sharing of seed is not an option. The environmental police is the order of the day once this law that is before Parliament is passed. You read the Plant Variety Act that was passed in, was it in 2013?
2014.
2014.
We put this into what we call open pollinated farmer variety. Why did we do that? This was research funded by public institution. If I was doing it as CLET, using CLET's money, I would definitely invest my money where I have rights over and protect and make a profit. In other words, instead of putting it in open pollinated, I would have put it in a hybrid. Where even if you chose to, let me finish the point.
There's nothing unique in Uganda.
Even if you chose to replant my hybrid that you have bought once, naturally, after one generation to the next, it segregates into the mother parents. So automatically you start losing on the yields. Uniformity is disappeared. So naturally you come back. Why do I do that? Because I've invested my money as CLET. And any private business, by the way, we are talking of a private company putting money. You know, it's like this NTV is a private company. It's not like UBC. UBC is a government company. So NTV must make money to pay its workers. And the investors must get back their money that they invested in. Now, you cannot expect me, who is not working for a government institution, to develop something that will be taken for free. If it must be given for free, then someone must pay for it. And that's why we have grants coming from government, grants coming from donors, and they don't come to an individual. They come to serve the interests of the general population for which
but are you also getting money from Monsanto?
Thank you.
And as a result, let me finish the point. As a result, a farmer will never come back to buy a variety which they know they are going to make a loss. Let me give you an example. A hybrid, when you go to Container Village here, it goes for an average of 7,000 shillings a kilogram. Open pollinated, the one you can plant and plant and plant, it will go for around 3,000, sometimes 2,000 shillings. When you plant an acre of a hybrid, the minimum that you will get if you do the soil practices very well and there is enough moisture, like Olupot will say, you will get around 2,000 kilograms for open pollinated. The one that you bought at 2,000, but when you go for the one you bought at 7,000, you are targeting roughly 4,000 kilograms. Now let's sell 4,000 kilograms because the difference it makes is 40,000 shillings for an acre. The end result is you are making 2 million shillings additional for spending an extra 2,000 shillings or 40,000 in an acre. You are making 2 million as profit. So the farmer will definitely go where they know they get better returns. So let's not deny farmers an opportunity to make a choice.
Can I ask another question?
Before you ask, I hope you are now satisfied that GMOs can be replanted. That was your question.
No, I am not convinced.
That is why
if you're not about to agree,
I'll tell you.
That is why I brought in the issue of doing the science with the politics behind it. If Dr. Lichai had internalized the Union for Protection of New Plant Varieties Act the law, this is a global law, European and all those
Let's
that
not
are
mix
associated
laws.
and the intellectual property.
The principles
you would
are
not be
different.
saying,
Let's
because
not mix laws.
the conditions are clear. No replanting, no sharing, monoculture,
I have
no
reviewed those
intercropping.
laws. I have reviewed
All
those
this
laws.
is there.
There are 3 things exceptions.
anybody.
So, Dr.
Anything
you
done
seem
for
to
national
suggest
interest.
these other doctors are moved by the interests of politics and economics.
It is
The-
just
the
the
question-
science.
Let me clarify on that.
The narrow focus.
Allow
of
me
the
to
science,
clarify on
the
that law he
isolation
has
of
quoted. On that law, there are 3 exceptions to the general rule. For purposes of research, no one will stop you from using what is protected. 2, anything done for public interest. That's why you had the Mandela that time when he was still alive, when these guys did not want South Africa to actually do generic drugs. He said, no, we are going to do it. Anything done for public interest.
You see, Patrick,
is allowed.
I think
Then the third one.
Let must
the
not
third-
take a lot of our time.
The third one is a subsistence. Farmer is excluded from the rule, including our own.
Let me be specific.
Let me bring in Dr. Okia here.
Maybe
No,
because
my next question
before you
is-
bring him, I want to be specific. The Indonesia case that I'm quoting, where it had to take the constitutional court to evoke the provisions of the 2009 Constitution of Indonesia to actually overturn the ruling that the company had sued the farmers, had to do with public interest. The issues
I
I'm
can
talking about
provide
in
an
Brazil,
explanation for that.
the issues I'm talking about in Argentina, even in America itself, it is to do with the witch hunting and harassment of farmers by the business-driven individuals.
So you consider some of these rogue scientists?
In countries,
Are these rogue
Not
scientists?
the fraudsters.
let me clarify this.
Yes.
In countries where subsidies apply,
Industry.
listen, in countries where
Great,
subsidies
we have listened to you
apply,
extensively.
We have
Where
listened to him.
subsidies
It's not even-
apply.
it's not even a trained agriculturist.
where subsidies
It's not even
apply.
a trained agriculturist.
No,
You not
listen
dominate.
to the issue.
You-
In
Gentlemen,
countries
doctor,
where
let's give
subsidies-
other
question is,
people a
who
chance.
is funding
where
GMO
You are not a
research
trained
in
agriculturist.
Uganda?
In
Dr.
countries.
Masika.
I don't know.
That is
I
the real
you
question.
can
Dr.
arrest
Dr.
us.
Oko.
Who is the
I know
largest?
you are a
Dr.
doctor.
Oko.
Let me
Dr.
other
Oko.
people also
I don't
contribute.
want you to lie to
You
the
are
public.
not a
Dr.
trained
Oko.
I
discipline,
don't
so
want
you
to lie
must
to
not
the public.
dominate.
I don't
Doctor-
want to
Let
lie to the
Dr.
public.
Lichai
I want to
talk,
expose your
because
lies.
he's a trained-
I want
a trained
allow
expert.
me to expose the lie
What
and
is
just
that?
show the public.
What is
We
that?
began here,
Let me
gentlemen.
expose- I had you address
This is-
him as doctor. Doctor of what?
Let
He has
me-
never got any PhD.
Let me-
Rest of my knowledge.
Lies.
Not
Let
even a
me expose
master's.
your lies.
He doesn't have
Let
a
me-
master's.
let me
Why are you
expose your
addressing
lies.
him as a
Let me
doctor?
expose
He's
your
not a
lies.
doctor. He doesn't even have a
Allow me to
master's.
I'm looking about to
He
ask
has
you
a
for your
bachelor's
credentials to bring them here.
forestry, which even got a
Next
pass.
time we'll come
Okay.
with certificates.
I'm not about to ask you to bring your
Why is he
certificates here.
dominating?
But
He
let
must
me-
not
let me-
dominate to
let me-
mislead the public.
This
No.
is what we agreed at the beginning, gentlemen. That this seems to be a very combustible debate. That we are going to speak one at a time. That we are going to respect each other's divergent opinion. That in fact, we should respect each other more when we disagree.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes us civil. Dr. Kerr.
I was going back to the issue of funding. A lot of the GMO research in Uganda is being funded. One of the biggest GMO programs, actually, I understand it's one of the biggest in Africa, is the water efficient maize program. It's funded extensively by foreign groups. Yes, let me call them foreign groups. And that means there is a commercial interest. No one is going to put $40 million into this venture to help the people. They will extract a price. And that price will be extracted from the African farmer, the Ugandan farmer. That is why we're saying it is an exploitative thing. It is something that is driven by profit. There is no one standing for the rights of farmers. No one is standing for the rights of indigenous communities who have developed the original materials. The original materials are taken from them, someone adds a trait, and then patents it and says, now this is mine, and I am the one who owns it. The Plant Variety Act that we're referring to gives rights to breeders to inspect people's farms, to come into any farm that they suspect someone is using their trait, check the maize. If they find their gene is there, they don't ask how it got there, the law is to give people rights to confiscate that maize. And we're saying we cannot allow our farmers to be exposed like that. We must have safeguards for our farmers. And we must protect our indigenous rights. The other thing is we have not taken time to protect our genetic materials. The other day, I think it was Naro that said that less than 10% of our genetic materials, like the millet, the things which we call ours, yes, is protected. We don't have seed banks. We don't have, I'm told we have to send our materials to Norway, to Sweden, for other people to store. Why don't we start by protecting what is our own, instead of rushing to contaminate with other genes from other countries that are owned by other people?
Okay. Is it a myth? Do we have seed banks or we don't?
First of all, I'd like to reassure Dr. Okia that the National Cultural Research Organization is a public entity, and therefore the biotechnology research that we do, the primary funding is from government. And this is funding that we have received for the last 15 years since the president opened the biotechnology laboratory at Kawanda. So every year we get money.
Can I ask
from government?
Have you received money from Monsanto?
Secondly, we have released over 1,000 varieties of crops as Naro that farmers are growing out there.
These are hybrids.
I'm sure before you came here you had a meal, and I'm very sure you ate a product of Naro. If you ate beans, if you ate granuts, if you ate simsim, if you ate sorghum, if you ate bananas, if you ate rice.
But these are hybrids, right?
Yes, and we're happy with that.
Yes, so what I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to tell you,
of the problem
is, and by the way, our GMO research is less than 5% of our total research. We still use a lot of other methods. We only use genetic engineering or GMO techniques where we have failed with the other techniques. And therefore,
I've seen one characteristic that when you give me a hybrid banana, yes, it is big and all that, but it's not sweet. But it does not taste like banana. So what do I lose by getting bigger yields? What is the compromise?
So what I wanted to tell him that when we get a GMO variety, we are going to make it available to farmers the same way we have made these 1,000 plus varieties available to farmers. Yeah, they will grow it. We are not going to pick the law of America to come and govern our variety protection.
No, I'm asking, why must I eat your banana and doesn't it taste like the banana I know?
So that's a very complicated issue that we deal with, that to improve a variety of banana, we have to use other banana. Otherwise, if you stick to the old banana that you are used to, new pests come out, new diseases come out to which the banana is not resistant, it will be wiped out. I'm sure you'll remember some varieties of banana that are extinct, that are no longer seen anywhere. Not because GMO has been introduced, but because they have been wiped out either by climatic conditions, pests, or diseases. So to improve that banana you like, we have to cross it with another type of banana, which is resistant to that pest. And many times, those bananas may not be as tasty as the other one. So when you cross the two, you get a new banana. It will be resistant to that pest, but it will also pick some characteristics. So it's a question
I have
of
to win lose something and gain something.
Some trade-off. When you gain, you lose. But what's your priority? Do you want to die of hunger, or you want to have food that may not taste?
Dr. Clegg, is it also true that sometimes you have to use wild species or wild plants to introduce them to domesticated plants so that you can give them the strength that they need?
Exactly. Actually, in
much
of our conventional breeding, most of those good genes, especially for climate-related challenges, you go back to the wild, because wild crops are naturally resistant to most of these challenges, whether drought, diseases, and anything you think about. Now, sometimes you come across a challenge where what you're dealing with is not indigenous, like the case of maize, bananas. Bananas is not indigenous, say, to Uganda. It came from Latin America, Honduras. So Honduras has a lot of diversity. But when it comes here, what we have was introduced, and because of the selection process, its genetic diversity has been narrowed so much. Now, like for sorghum that I developed and released in actually 4 countries, we got genes for resistance to striga. Striga is a notorious weed. They came from wild crops. And this brings me to a point Dr. Okia was talking about.
So you have mixed the wild crop with the sorghum.
Yeah, the wild crop, meaning the wild relatives of the same species. But sometimes, like the wheat, most of the wheat actually that we eat, they got ryegrass, which was not necessarily the same family like the wheat, crossed with the wheat, because the wheat itself was growing very tall and was susceptible to lodging. It would fall when there's wind. So farmers were making a lot of losses. So they introduced a gene for short or draft one from the ryegrass, which was meant for goats. And it gave rise to the current wheat that we eat today. Now, that process was conventional. But right now, you can select a gene for shortness or draftness and introduce using a process of genetic engineering. So you don't necessarily have to cross. But the point I want to make is that the breeding process has evolved as humankind has continued to evolve. So traditionally, it was simple selection. Then crossing. After crossing, then we used mutagenesis. Some of the matoke we eat, bananas, were developed as a result of subjecting bananas to high radiations that changed the genes. And through a process of now environmental trials, better performing were selected. And that's what we have. But the original banana had its genes multiplied 4 times. That's why we have banana being a tetraploid, having its genes increased 4 times. And that's how we lost the seeds in the banana to what we have today. And I'm sure you'll not enjoy a banana which has seeds inside. Sometimes when you go to these markets, you may find a banana with seeds. But
so
the selection process
I hope people are listening very well.
Has gotten out that.
What Dr. Clayton has
I haven't seen a banana with seed though.
He has just said that to do the same thing as genetic engineering, an option you can do is to radiate, use rays.
Yes, that has been happening.
To disrupt DNA.
Exactly.
In other words, genetic modification is a disruption of DNA.
That is perfectly okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
When you disrupt DNA, that is the whole point we're saying. You cause a lot of danger.
Dr. Kia, you know that DNA is self-correcting.
Yes.
Let's speak one at a time. Dr. Kia now.
DNA you know that every X-ray that you take increases your risk of getting cancer. Especially if you use a big one, like a CT scan, yes, which is equivalent to about 100 X-rays, it increases risk of leukemias, lymphomas. So this is what we're saying. You're disrupting willfully the DNA that was meant to be bound up, and now you disrupt it and you cause disease. So why do you take this and now feed it to the population? Move a population that is just trying to come up, we're trying to achieve middle income status, and now they are being poisoned, yes?
You know, I think at the beginning, Dr. Olpot was telling us, look, we have East Africa's most arable land is here in Uganda. We have water. We have fertile soils. We have everything. Can't we use the natural God-given kind of advantages to produce?
Is right, because in agriculture, we have a value chain, and we have specialists. There are issues to deal with soil. No one disputes that. Everything needs water, or some level of water at least.
Yes.
Everything needs nutrients.
And we have all those in abundance
but
here
now
in Uganda.
You cannot
see. Yes, you have to use irrigation.
That's not all.
But now, it does not mean that all of us must solve a problem using one means. We are saying where soil is not a limiting factor. For example, a soil problem or water problem cannot actually address a problem of disease. Even if the child is well fed, if you have malaria, you actually have malaria.
How do you respond to that, Dr. Lopot?
That's what I'm saying, that training matters. So when you are talking from a position of knowledge, what I normally tell my students is that as you approach exams, make sure that you feed well and have enough sleep. Because when you are stressed, even a dose of malaria that you would not even notice that you had it would knock you down. So the problem, the burden of pests and diseases that we are battling with has to do with the deterioration of the capacity of the soil to provide the support that the plant would need. A plant supplied with adequate sulfur, potassium and silicon would not need any pesticide to even control a pest or disease. It would naturally withstand.
So it can withstand an armyworm.
Oh dear.
First of all, it's good you have reminded me about armyworm. The BT toxin was not introduced for armyworm, but the maize stalk borer. But back to the point that Dr. Alicia is trying to water down. Me, I'm talking as a soil scientist with a background in plant nutrition.
And I'm a plant pathologist with a background in plant diseases.
So what I'm telling you is, if a plant has enough sulfur, enough silicon, enough potassium, forget about your pesticides. And that is one thing that the companies like Monsanto fought to knock out of our textbooks, was that element, silicon. Sulfur is coming on board, but when you have sulfur and silicon, no pesticide. The plant, because there is nitrogen is for vegetative growth, phosphorus is for roots, potassium is for photosynthesis, turgidity and all this. Silicon and sulfur were meant for plant protection. What do we do when we fall sick? We should just eat food. We should not go for treatment. If you, they say health is made at home and it is repaired in the what?
We are what we eat anyway.
So if you feed well, and you observe all the other issues like hygiene.
I think I have to really emphasize that.
You will not get malaria.
Yeah?
People are undermining the critical role of nutrition.
Yeah.
And not only the critical role of nutrition, but the contribution of nutrition.
Explain this in reference to HIV/AIDS, which we know very well.
That if you feed well,
you don't get it.
People live long.
Let me ask you this question.
The doctor is here.
But we're now really going quite controversial.
That's what he's saying.
80%.
That it's only nutrition that matters.
He's a medical doctor, so listen to him.
Which kind of people are most susceptible to getting HIV/AIDS around the world?
That's what we call predisposition, but
which predisposition? No, which people? Yes. Just answer that question.
Well, Sub-Saharan Africa, that means people are poor, poorly fed and stuff like that.
What is the common denominator?
Isn't that social issue?
Malnutrition,
causing what? What does the social issue cause?
Well, the social issue, the way how they behave.
Now that is incorrect. The research is clear.
The point we want,
the Africans are not behaving differently from other people, yes, but they have weaknesses, yes, which make them susceptible to infection, and a lot of that relates to nutrition. A lot of the diseases which we have, like the heart disease,
African Americans more in the US, but they're living
and they're the most malnourished group in that country.
Yeah.
Now, the point, gentlemen, don't play with food.
No.
Yes?
The point
why do people walk into a supermarket and they choose to pay 3 times more for organic, yes, and even demand that they be specially labeled? It is because inherently they are foods which are bad for
Let me ask Ugandans to maybe contribute to this discussion. So I'm opening up this discussion to you. The numbers are on the screen, and please let us have the very first call online. Tell us what you think. Tell us your name, where you're calling from, and make it very brief so that at least we can have 3 or 4 people to discuss with them. Hello? 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 Okay, looks like we're going to drop that line and then try pick another caller. Please tell us your name, where you're from, and make it very brief. So I'm going to take 3 callers. Hello? Okay. I think I'm having a problem with the lines.
The issue of whether nutrition obviously is important for a healthy life, but whether you're well fed or not, when the disease-causing agent comes, you'll get infection, because disease is a factor of the disease-causing agent itself, your genetics, that's the plant, the individual, and of course environment, which means things like vectors, the mosquitoes, and so on. So
that's why there's vaccination or immunization.
You cannot underwrite the importance of protection. That is either attained through vaccination or even treatment, that you're only going to deal with nutrition, and that provides enough protection.
Even your vaccine will not work in someone who is weakened.
But you acknowledge that a vaccine is important, is necessary.
Yes, and that's not what we're discussing. We're talking about modifying food. Yeah. Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Dr. Paul, is it also true that if we go GMO, we may lose the market for our products on the world market?
I would be less concerned with that because they are not wanted in America, they are not wanted in Europe, they are not wanted in Canada, they are not wanted in Asia. Where are you going to sell them? But my biggest concern is the health. When you engineer a plant to produce a Bt toxin, which is an insect killer, a wealth of research has shown that the death does not stop with the insect. The pigs have died, the rats have died, and all this. And that brings me to the real, Dr. Licha talked about ethics here. The bananas in Kawanda, the maize in Kasese, the golden rice and brown streak virus-resistant cassava in Namlonge, which they want to unleash to the population as soon as this law is passed. I want them to tell us the trials as science requires, the principles, ethical principles require that you have to begin with the lowest ranking organisms up to the primates, the closest to us. I want any single safety study that has been conducted to test the safety of those organisms before they are even introduced to the chimpanzees and monkeys, let alone now to the humans that they are dying to release once they are released.
Dr. Titus.
There are international standards, global standards, that you cannot jump from your lab and straight to the market. Even Dr. Okia will know that a medicine has to go through clinical trials. So similarly, whatever Naro is developing, what the crops he has talked about, will have to go through a thorough risk safety assessment.
But they are dying to release them to the farmers.
No.
That's why they want to use law.
We have not, yes.
The
law is to ensure the safety.
In Iowa State,
not allowing yourselves one to speak at a time. Dr. Laporte, let him conclude his what?
So in brief, we will demonstrate the safety beyond reasonable doubt, and will not be the ones to demonstrate the safety. We'll give these plans to others, however the regulations may choose. Independent labs to do the safety assessment. He is free to suggest the labs where the safety should be done. And when we talk about safety, we know what we are looking for to test. So those tests will be done, and there is no way a GMO variety is going to leave narrow to go to a farmer when its safety has not been demonstrated.
In fact, the bill is called biotechnology and biosafety.
Yes,
bill.
but point of information.
Okay,
this bill is weak on biosafety provisions and weak on those impact assessments. We have laws, for example, to govern the oil sector.
Risk assessment, yes, not impact assessment.
The oil sector. The law requires that they must carry out social impact assessment. What is going to be the effect of releasing this on the society? The promoters right now are fighting to remove these options from our law. Right now, there's no provision for social assessment.
You cannot
no provision for environmental assessment. There is a watered down provision to remove liability of a person corporate, which means that there was even another clause which we have been battling that said that people should not be held liable at all.
Of Uganda National Council for
Yes,
Science and
if anyone works in this sector and is affiliated with government, he should not be responsible for whatever happens when they release these GMOs. If the thing is safe, then people should accept to be liable. Since you have said it is safe, then we say if it causes any problem, you should be held strictly liable.
Thank you. It's not true that the current bill, which was returned by the president, does not have clauses that deal with punishments and clauses that deal with safety assessment and socio-economic issues. Those things are there. In fact, one of the clauses there clearly indicates that anyone who uses a GMO to harm the environment should be sentenced to life. It doesn't even give a judge room to actually analyze the issue.
When did that
it is very clear. It's right there.
Let him state
it is right there.
For reference.
Because we
the
insisted.
one that the president returned.
We insisted and we pushed for that clause. Yes, it was not there.
Point of information.
Yeah, I gave them their time. If you go back to the bill that was Biosafety Act 2017 as returned by the president on the clause of penalties, 35, it's 5 or 36 F. It is very clear. Now the other thing is that it clearly provides, because it has guidelines on research, which clearly provides for those safety assessments. And the whole reason a law is required is for predictability. I mean, you need to be predictable. What if I do things, then the next day you actually come up with a law and I've wasted all this
The president concerned
effort.
was that scientists who mix GMOs with indigenous crops and animals must be sanctioned. I think
No, he was actually inquiring. Now, at the bottom of his letter, he said, I'm thinking clarification of this issue. So the clarification is, we refer him to that clause, which is clearly saying anyone who deliberately harms the environment. And besides, we have the NEMA Act. The NEMA Act provides for restoration. And the NEMA Act is the mother law on environmental issues. It provides for restoration, and it also provides for compensation to as near as possible. Okay. Now, the other thing that our colleagues here are asking for is that you must be held strictly reliable. I want to ask Dr. Okia, we have started Ebola trials, right? By the time it is cleared, after all these experiments, that's now time to try. Or it's now time to vaccinate frontline health workers.
I'm told they're doing it in Uganda.
Now, supposing someone comes up the next day and says, you see, as a result of this Ebola vaccination, I have suffered some allergies. Now, if the law in health was that you must be strictly held reliable, even the original developer, those who actually were involved in the whole process are actually held reliable. Would doctors actually perform the job they are doing?
Why not?
Would they perform the job? Why do doctors go even, other than that protection, they even go, if you are going to go an operation, they say you sign here. Why do we do that? They are trying to protect themselves, because otherwise at that point, you can say, oh, I would have survived. But other than the doctor performing their job, there is a higher chance that you actually die. Now, by the doctor performing this chance, there's a higher chance. Actually, there's a 50% chance. You may survive, you may die. And for them to protect themselves, they say, sign here. So who is a bioscientist to risk their lives by putting there a stupid law?
Our requirements in medicine.
Not do anything in agricultural research.
And that's what we are saying.
Okay, our time is running out. This is what we're going to do.
Because I am not tied.
We're going to have closing arguments with somebody with pro and against. I'm beginning with you, Dr. Kia, your parting shot.
Thank you. He raises a pertinent question. What about health? In health, we have very, very stringent measures before you release anything to the public. You must first experiment on animals extensively. You must feed them whatever substance until the point that the animal either dies or something, to prove that this thing is true. Why are we not conducting that? From animals, you move now, from the rats, you move to primates. How many monkeys have we fed on these wonderful inventions and studied them? Yes. After that, you must get volunteers who sign the same thing, that I release you from the liability. We feed them GMOs for 12 months, and we see what happens. Yes. If it is science, if it is, you're saying it is at that level of medicine, which it is, because you're experimenting and you're feeding people, then let us do those tests. If they are fine, no problem.
Dr. Clayt, your parting shot.
Our listeners, the process of developing GMOs has evolved just like a telephone technology. We started from some funny phones, now they have improved. Now I can literally perform everything using this phone. And definitely there are more technologies that are going to come. So GMO is an evolution and it's very safe. There is no single study in this world that has ever shown any GMO not to be safe or harmful to humans. All GMOs that have been on the market are safe. And all of us, as we seated here, there's a 90% chance that we are actually wearing GMO clauses. These are cotton clauses. A cotton clause, and globally, we have more than 90% of the global powers in the cotton industry using GMOs. So let's give farmers a chance, and the farmers will decide what to pick and what not to pick. But let us, not as elites, deny them the opportunity. our farmers here should be given the same opportunity like those in the United States, like those in China, like those in India, and they make a choice for themselves.
Okay.
These things are very safe.
Dr. Lopot, your parting shot.
My parting shot, as I said in the beginning, is that we must get the basics right. Let's know the capacity to which we can push that farmer with longer term when we have the problem of water and nutrients addressed. And I'm happy that government is actually on the ground. I'm involved in providing technical reports about the soil tests where irrigation programs are going on in eastern Uganda. And to me, that is the way to go. For the trials in Kawanda, in Serere, in Namulonge, in Kasese, we are not, there is no emergency in this country. We have just seen what the rain has done. Just that is only water. What if we add the nutrients? What are we really talking about? We must understand the problem that the GMOs are coming to address. So far, I do not get any.
Dr. Titus, your concluding remark?
Thank you, Mr. Kamara. I want to say that we are blessed as a country that our government has invested quite heavily in biotechnology. Now we have the capacity to do our own biotechnology research. We have, and we look at the whole value chain. We even look at issues of soils, traditional way, and also using biotechnology. So biotechnology definitely has a place in our economy. And when we say that, we are not looking at the problems of today. We're even looking at problems of 50 years from now. That we see a role for biotechnology to increase our productivity, to alleviate issues with our environment, issues of nutrition. There's a very strong role for biotechnology.
Thank you
that, and luckily enough
very
to
much,
do that.
Dr. Titus. Thank you very much. All of you have been a part of this discussion. At least now you understand people who are on a different divide of the debate, and I'm sure this debate is going to continue. Luckily enough, for tonight, we are able to bring you people who are experts in different fields. Thank you, Dr. Joseph Okia, because for you, you are an internal medicine specialist, I'm told. Dr. Girgon Olupot, you're a soil biophysicist. Dr. Clayton Wandui Masiga, a breeding and genetic scientist, and Dr. Titus Salichai, a plant virologist. So, gentlemen, this debate must continue because I think because you love your country more, so you do not want it to hand it over to people who can harm Ugandans. And I'm sure at the end of the day, the biosafety, the biotechnology and biosafety bill will get the clauses that are good.
Yes.
And maybe those ones that are not desirable will not see the light of day. Good night and God bless Uganda.
Thank you.
Thank you.